Recently, I was at a mastermind. I was asked to speak, and I was doing a Q&A at the end of my talk. And one of the participants asked me, how do you overcome some of your biggest business failures? How did you overcome that adversity and keep going? And to be honest with you guys, I think this topic of adversity and challenges and failure and struggles is something that is worthy of discussion. I think we should talk about it a lot more than we do, because oftentimes it's the fear of failure, the fear of the adversity, the challenges that hold us back, and simply not facing them, not addressing them, not leaning into them ultimately is one of the biggest things that causes us to not achieve the goals, the life, the dreams that we have.
I won't waste another minute, no, I won't. I'm a man on a mission. I'm a man on a mission. I don't need no permission. I'm a man on a mission.
Welcome to Entitled to Nothing, where we believe our life is our fault. My name is Mink, and I started this show because I've spent the last 20 years running headfirst into failure after failure, and I've learned how to turn my failures into lessons, and I've used those lessons to create life on my terms. I went from broke and bankrupt with 6 figures in debt to starting multiple companies that have generated over $50 million in sales, and I want to share everything I've learned on my journey to help inspire you on yours. Today, we're going to talk about adversity and how to overcome it. Recently, I was at a mastermind. I was asked to speak, and I was doing a Q&A at the end of my talk. And one of the participants asked me, how do you overcome some of your biggest business failures? How did you overcome that adversity and keep going? And to be honest with you guys, I think this topic of adversity and challenges and failure and struggles is something that is worthy of discussion. I think we should talk about it a lot more than we do, because oftentimes it's the fear of failure, the fear of the adversity, the challenges that hold us back, and simply not facing them, not addressing them, not leaning into them ultimately is one of the biggest things that causes us to not achieve the goals, the life, the dreams that we have. In a previous episode, I talked about the greatest competition we'll ever have is with ourselves. And oftentimes that competition exists between where you are today and where you want to be. And in the middle of that is the adversity, is the unknown, is the uncertainty. It's the shit that you don't know that you don't know. It's the failure that you're guaranteed to experience on the path. And I think the only reason why I've been able to overcome my failures from, I went into debt 6 figures, had to file bankruptcy, made a couple $1,000,000 in my next business venture, had a lot of success. Then I lost all of it. And then I went in 6 figures in debt again, starting Live Bearded. In the beginning, I put everything on credit card. Took out a personal loan. And at one point in time, I had another $100,000+ in debt. And I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to turn it around. And I think the one thing that every winner has in common is they've learned how to fail. In fact, I would suggest that the people that have won the most have done so because they've also failed more than everyone else. Whether you think about a sports analogy, a business analogy, I was literally just watching this video the other day, and it was Elon Musk, and he was talking about the creation and the development of Tesla and SpaceX and everything that happened. And he said there was a moment in 2008 when the world economies were collapsing, and he goes, I was out of money. He made $1 billion+ on PayPal, and he invested all of it into Tesla and SpaceX and his ventures. And he said it was Christmas Eve, 2008. And in the last hour of the last day, I secured a round of funding that would have allowed Tesla to continue to keep going. But if I didn't get that round of funding, he goes, I know with absolute certainty Tesla would have went bankrupt and SpaceX would have never existed. And so here you have the wealthiest man in the world saying that literally all of his fortune, all of his success over the last 15 years came down to one moment, one decision in time, one action that took place. And it was such a reminder to me that the people that win the most are on the brink of failure and have failed more often than anyone else. I have a quote on my wall and it says, "The road to success is paved with failure." And one of the things that I believe is success and failure are two sides of the same coin. And if you look at, like, baseball is a great analogy. To go to the Hall of Fame, you hit the ball 3 out of every 10 times at bat. You got to hit the ball 300. And that means you're failing 7 out of 10 times. This is just this universal principle in life that we're going to fail way more than we ever succeed. It's in our failures, in our adversity, that we actually develop the skills, the muscles, and the capacity to win. And so often we hold ourselves back from ever getting started because we have failed and we don't know how to deal with it, or we're afraid of the adversity and the challenges and the unknown, and so we never get started. And today what I want to do is share with you how I've overcome some adversity in my life, maybe share a story with you, and talk about how all of us can start to see adversity not as a negative, but as a positive. You know, I think if we can see adversity as happening for us, as an opportunity for us to grow, as it's exposing where we're weak or where we need to lean into, and we can see the challenges and the struggle of life as a worthy opponent, then you give yourself the opportunity to overcome and endure anything that comes your way. And if there's one thing I think we could all agree, life is fucking hard. Things are going to break. Stuff is going to go wrong. We're going to struggle at times. And I think we get a decision. We have a decision in every moment to make. And that decision is this happening to me? Am I going to be a victim of this moment, of this challenge, of this struggle? Or is it happening for me? And it's given to me by my Creator so I can grow, so I can evolve, so I can expand my capacity. A couple weeks ago, I had a conversation with a good buddy of mine named Dave Scatcherd. And if you guys listen to the podcast, if you haven't listened to that episode, I highly recommend it. But Dave was talking about how, you know, when we get started, our capacity is only so big, right? But then we experience some type of failure or some type of loss or some type of setback in an area of our life. And in order to overcome that setback or right that wrong, we have to get better in that area of our life. And so, you know, maybe it's in our relationships. You know, maybe we've had a few failed relationships and we have to learn how to become a better partner and a better, participant in our relationships. We need to maybe fix and evolve or grow some aspects of ourselves so that we are able to enjoy that partnership. Or in business, right? I have failed over and over in business. And every time I failed, it was because I was missing a skill or a character trait or a belief. And the only way that I was able to expand past that point was to invest into my skills, into my character traits, into my beliefs, to develop my capacity to create more, to be more, to do more. And so I think today, as we talk about adversity, the very most important lesson that I think I can share with you guys is adversity is coming. There is a storm on the horizon. We don't wish for it. We don't want it to happen, but we anticipate it's going to, because the truth of life is it's going to fucking happen. And the best thing that we can do is understand that tough days will come, and it's not the tough days that are the problem. It's viewing them as a problem that's the issue. I heard, you guys know I love Tony Robbins, and he said the greatest problem you have is you think you shouldn't have them. But problems are given to us so we can grow, so we can evolve, so we can expand our capacity. And I can tell you guys, probably a moment in my life where I felt my capacity expand, maybe more than any other time, was in 2020, was during COVID. You know, I think we all have our own experience of COVID and what that meant for us. And, you know, maybe you lost someone. My experience of COVID was intense, and not actually because of the virus, but because of a whole series of events that were taking place before that. Right in the beginning of February, I took a trip down to Hawaii. I love Maui. I'm going down there next week, actually. So we're going to do some interviews and some podcasts on location. But in like the beginning of February 2020, I was in Maui, and I reconnected with a friend that was down there, and we were watching the sunset and we were chatting. And she shared with me that she had a brain tumor, and it was a very aggressive form of cancer, and that the doctors were going to have to perform brain surgery, and they didn't know if she was going to make it. And if she did make it, there was a likelihood that they wouldn't be able to get all of the tumor because it was so rapidly expanding, and she was going to lose all of her motor function. And I just remember, while this didn't have anything to do with me, I just remember feeling so much, so much compassion and empathy for my friend in this moment, and thinking, damn, life is so short. And in a moment, anything can happen to us. We need to just really try to maximize every day. So this is February 2020. On that trip, that very same trip, a few days later, my mom called me and said that my stepfather had just had a massive heart attack. My mom was scared. She was like really worried that he wasn't going to make it. And, she was kind of telling me what was going on. And ultimately I was trying to be there to support her as much as possible, but I was in Hawaii. She was back in Montana. And so, we were staying in touch, but I could really tell that she was really, really struggling and really scared. And so I was feeling some of that emotion for my mom as well. When I got back to Arizona about a week later, and my mom called me again and said, Anthony, he had another heart attack. This one was like a quadruple bypass. They're going to have to do open heart surgery. They're going to have to replace his arteries. Now, again, this wasn't impacting me personally, like my physical body, but just to see my mom that scared and go through that, my heart was going out to her, and I was trying to think about how I could support her and what I could do. Meanwhile, I was back in Arizona running the company and getting everything going, and we were on set shooting a commercial when one of our employees, Justin, who is a family member of ours, he's been with us for so many years, and he's my business partner's biological brother, had a heart attack on set in front of all of our employees. And we had to call the ambulance. He got in the ambulance. He was rushed to the hospital. He flatlined on his way to the hospital. My business partner, obviously, Spence, he was a wreck. So I'm trying to support him. I'm trying to hold down the company. And I'm thinking to myself, what the fuck is going on? First, a friend has a brain tumor. Then my stepfather has 2 heart attacks in a week. Now one of my employees in front of my eyes has a heart attack. And I'm just thinking, wow, this is, I get choked up thinking about it. It's just, there's a lot going on here. Now it was middle of February, and then March 3rd, my sister called me and said, Anthony, Dad is in a coma. She's like, I went to his house to check on him, and he was laying lifeless on the floor. I called the emergency. The ambulance is on the way, but I'll keep you updated. So now I'm like, friend, stepfather, Justin, and now my father is in a coma. And so to make a long story short, I go to Oregon the next day. I get to the hospital, and the doctor pulls me aside and he says, Anthony, your father has severe liver failure. And you guys know he was he drank a lot in his life, and it had finally caught up to him, and his liver had failed, and his body had become so toxic due to the liver not working that he went into a coma. And at first the doctor tells me, we think that we're going to be able to revive him. We've got him on a bunch of meds. We're going to try to get him back into consciousness and get him awake. And shortly thereafter that, they called me in and they said, Anthony, everything has changed, and we don't think he's going to make it. And he's on a superhuman dose of drugs. And as his next of kin, we need to ask you, you need to make a decision. Do you want to try to keep him on life support and we can do everything that we can? Or if you want, we can make the decision, or you can make the decision to take him off life support and say your goodbyes. Now, there's a whole series of events that lead up to this moment. And in my heart, after he had wanted to kill himself and told me he was going to kill himself and all this stuff, I knew in my heart that it was a privilege to make that decision for him. And so I made the decision to take him off life support and to be in the room and hold his hand while he passed away. And I just remember the intensity of that moment, the experience, the emotion, the pain, the sadness, the regret. I remember in that moment feeling so much like I wish I would have loved more and done more and tried. Like I just had all of this wave of emotion. Now, this is March 4th, 2020. I get back to Arizona 10 days later after taking care of his affairs and getting him cremated, going through that whole process. I come into the office on like March 12th and I tell my guys, hey, I want to take a little bit of time off. I want to process this. I think I'm going to maybe go on a trip somewhere, maybe be gone for a couple weeks. And everyone on the team is like, of course, no problem. But now I'm conflicted because we got Justin is in the hospital still. My dad passed away, my business partner. Like, there's all this fucking chaos. And then March 15th hits and the world shuts down and our business, like our sales drop 70% overnight. And I was like, well, now I can't go anywhere. Now my business is on the brink of collapse. I've got all these people and salaries and infrastructure. And if sales don't turn around, like, what am I going to do? I'm not going to be able to pay the bills. The business in 2020 was really just on the cusp of profitability and getting going. And I remember just sitting there thinking, how the fuck am I going to find the courage and the strength to get through all of this? I've got a friend with cancer. My stepfather's, 2 heart attacks. One of my employees and my business partner's brothers in the hospital on life support with a heart attack, needing to get open heart surgery. My dad passes away. Now COVID, and then the business falls 60, 70%. Man, God must have a sense of humor. And in that moment, I just realized, you know what? Like, I don't know how we're going to get through this. I don't know what we're going to do. But the only thing I can do is show up every day and lean in and embrace this. I'm going to strive to be the best that I can be in this moment. And, I think oftentimes there's 2 types of adversity in life. There is life-created adversity. There's external situations and circumstances and things that are happening outside of our control. And in 2020, for me, all of that I just explained to you is outside of my control. And I'm sure you have your own story. I'm sure you have your own experiences of what happened in that period of your life or another period when maybe you lost someone or went through a tragic event. There's external adversity. And I think the best thing that we can do in those moments is understand that life is happening for us, that there is a plan, that our Creator has given this to us for a purpose. And although we might not know it is, and it might hurt, and it might be one of the most painful things that we go through, on the other side of that is a greater strength, is a greater capacity. And I've said this before, but one of my favorite authors is Michael Singer. He wrote The Surrender Experiment, The Untethered Soul. And one of the things that he says that really changed my life is this. He said, every experience of life, all of the good and all of the bad, makes us a more complete version of ourselves. It gives us the capacity to connect with people at a deeper level. It's hard to connect with someone if you haven't really been to the same place emotionally or spiritually or physically that they have. And so by going and growing through these experiences of life, we're becoming a greater version of ourselves. And that's why I say these moments expand our capacity. So there's the external adversities of life, and then there's the internal adversities of life. There's the self-inflicted ones, the fears, the doubts, the limiting beliefs. There's the I don't knows and the what ifs. There's all of the internal shit that we have to deal with at times. And I think in life, if we see them for what they are, as an opportunity for us to lean in, embrace, grow, and ultimately, I think the things that we're most afraid of, that we're fearful of, those are the greatest areas of opportunity for us, because on the other side of that is a new capacity. And I gotta tell you guys, that's what I experienced in 2020 when our sales fell 70% and we're going through this. I called an all hands team meeting. And at the time we had 7-8 people on the team. It wasn't a big company. And I said, guys, let's create a game plan. Like, we have no idea what's going to happen. We got no idea what's going on in the world, right? There's a lot of people that are scared. We're all dealing with different things. And it's our responsibility as men to be leaders. And what we can do right now, I think the best thing that we can do is lead ourselves first, to lead each other and to hold each other accountable, and then ultimately find ways that we can provide certainty and clarity and something of value to the world in this moment. I remember it just like it was yesterday. We were in our little office area, and I said, in the greatest moments of uncertainty, which are typically in periods of adversity, we have to bring certainty to those moments. And ultimately, I think the only way that we get through the most challenging times is to find some certainty in the uncertainty, whether that is within a belief structure, maybe it's your faith, or maybe it's the team that you're working with, your partner, your loved ones, your family. Maybe it's just the fact that you know you will never fucking quit and you will do whatever it fucking takes to figure it out. For me, that has been what's carried me and pulled me through the majority of my adversities. For me, the way that I've overcome the majority of my adversities in life is by doing 3 things. And the first thing is saying, this is my fault. And that's really difficult when it's an external circumstance, because again, none of those things that I experienced in 2020 were my fault. They were all external adversities. But by saying, okay, I'm not in control of what happens outside of me, but I'm always in control of what happens inside of me. The way that I react and respond, that's my fault. And the way that I show up in this moment is going to be far more important than anything that's happening outside of me. I think this is, if there's one lesson, if there's one thing that I could persuade you to believe today, it's this. How you react and respond is far more important. It will have a much greater impact on your life than the external circumstances and situations. Because at the end of the day, the only thing we control is our reactions. It's the meanings that we create about why it's happening and what it means. It's the stories we tell about the circumstance and the situation. And often, whenever we're experiencing a lot of adversity, we typically ask ourselves one of 2 questions. Why is this happening? And what does it mean? And how you answer those questions is ultimately going to determine how this experience builds you or breaks you. Why is it happening and what does it mean? I think these are 2 of the most important questions we will ever ask ourselves, especially when we're facing difficult times. And it's the meaning that we give it that determines the experience we have. And then what are we going to do about it? What does it mean? That ultimately gives us the perspective that we take on how to approach it. So why is this happening? I don't know why it's happening typically. And asking that question is typically it's worthless. Yes, it's nice to know why things are happening, but oftentimes it's a worthless question because we'll never know. It's unanswerable in many cases. And so for me, whenever I think of why is this happening, my default program says it's happening so I can grow. It's happening so I can learn. It's happening so that I can expand my capacity. If I don't know why something is happening, if it's an external circumstance and it's happening outside of me, yes, there is times where we must ask ourselves why, and we need to dissect and look at what we did wrong and how we contributed to that factor. And if your experience has your contribution to it, then you should ask, why is this happening? And you should dissect and try to figure out what part you played in creating that experience. So that is important. But if it's an external thing like COVID, my father passing away, heart attacks, circumstances that we just don't have any impact on, asking why in those moments, I think it's worthless in a lot of cases, because we're going to potentially give ourselves a really disempowering meaning in those moments. And so for me, my default is to say, okay, why is this happening? If I don't know what it is, God must be giving this to me for a reason. I must need to expand my capacity in this direction. I must need to develop the skills to overcome this moment so that I can solve a greater problem or rise to a greater occasion in the future. In life, we have this problem-solution feedback loop where we have a problem, we have an adversity, and then we learn how to overcome it and we break through. And then at that next level, we have a whole nother round of new problems, new challenges, and new adversities. And so life, in its most purest form, is us learning how to solve problems. And we solve one problem, and then the next one, and then the next one, and you just keep solving the problems and the challenges, the setbacks, the adversities of life over and over and over until your expansion of your capacity grows to such a point that you become someone who's unrecognizable. You become someone who has the capacity to live a life, to create and to be and to do things that you could have never imagined when you got started. And candidly, this is what my experience has been in my life and in business. When I got started, I had no idea what to do, and I just invested into my capacity, and I leaned into the fears and the doubts, and I failed, and I learned how to overcome that failure, and I did it again and again. And next thing you know, you look back a decade later, and your life and what you're living today is a dream in comparison to what it used to be. But that's only possible if you're in the game. And the game of life is one of problems and solutions, of failures and setbacks. And if we can just embrace that life is a series of challenges, and rather than seeing those challenges as happening to us, or life is mad at us, or God hates us, or shit is going wrong, if we could just see it as a worthy opponent that is calling us to grow, almost all of the friction goes away. I think, again, the biggest problem we have is we think we shouldn't have them. But if we can see our problems as worthy opponents on our path to becoming the man that we're created to be, then it's just another step on the journey. It's just another problem to solve on the path of going where you're destined to go. Whenever I'm facing a really big adversity, I do three things. The first thing I do is take responsibility for it. And I say, okay, how am I going to show up in this moment? I'm going to own the meaning, the story, and my personal reaction and my experiences. I'm going to take radical responsibility for this result. I'm entitled to nothing. My life is my fault, and I will take responsibility for this experience. And once we take responsibility for it, we have the power to overcome it. And then the second step is to really figure out what area of your life needs to expand for you to get through this moment, right? If you're facing a financial setback and maybe you're struggling right now, maybe you're living paycheck to paycheck and you don't know how you're going to pay off some bills or really get out of that stress cycle of financial despair and insecurity. The truth is, that moment is your fault. Being in that position is your fault. Now, maybe you didn't have someone to help teach you the skills, or you didn't know what you didn't know. And so you have to forgive yourself for not knowing what you didn't know, but then you have to take responsibility for not knowing what you didn't know. And then you have to go acquire some knowledge. You have to figure out how to bridge that gap from where you are to where you want to go. And all of the growth that we will experience in life typically is found in one of three areas. Either we need to expand our skills, we need to develop some new skills, some new knowledge, some new expertise. We need to develop some new character traits, right? Our life, our habits, our routines, our rituals are a result of our character traits. If you're not a very disciplined person and you need to be very disciplined to create the results that you want, then you have to expand your capacity in your character traits and become more disciplined. So you got to increase your skills. You got to figure out what you need to learn. Then you need to develop the character traits required that type of person would have to get to the next level. And then finally, you've got to develop a belief system that tells you whatever it is that you want is possible. So using that financial example again, right? The adversity that you might be facing is financial difficulty. You're living paycheck to paycheck. You've got your credit card debts piling up and you're just not sure how to figure it out, how to make it through. Well, you need to develop some skills around financial intelligence. You need to develop some character traits that say you're the type of person that figures this out. You're the type of person that has the discipline and the intelligence. You're dedicated to figuring out how to overcome this obstacle. And then you have to develop the belief system that says, I'm freaking great with money. I'm intelligent with my finances. I'm learning and growing how to become financially independent, financially successful. And then you put those three things into action and you're going to overcome that level of adversity. And then the next level of adversity comes and the next one. But ultimately, I think all of our ability to overcome the failures, the challenges, and the trials of life starts with our mindset, with our psychology. I believe that the perspective we take on life is going to determine the experience we have of life. And if we can both agree that we're always going to have adversity, then our perspective must be we are the type of people that embrace the adversity, that we work and strive and pursue solutions, and we grow through the pain and failure, because on the other side of that adversity is growth and is a greater capacity for us to live and serve and create the life that we want. All right, so I want to end with two frameworks that I've used in my life, and I want you to use in your life because these frameworks will give you the outlook or the perspective that you need to overcome any of your adversity and any of the obstacles or failures that you feel, that you experience, okay? So the first one is you've got to see your failures, your setbacks, your challenges as a worthy opponent, something that is calling you to grow. And I believe to be a leader, there's three things we must do. Leaders must see the situation as it is, but not worse than it is. If you compound the negative experience and pile on, it's going to make it worse than it actually is. And too often, right, when it rains, it pours. We've heard that saying. And it's because people pile on. It's because they see it worse than it is. So if you're going to overcome adversity, if you're going to become a true leader, if you're going to create an incredible life, a life on your terms, you have to see adversity as a worthy opponent. And then you have to see every challenge as it is, but not worse than it is. And then from there, you have to figure out a way to see it better than it is. You've got to bring some level of certainty and clarity to that moment and say, you know what? This is happening for me. I'm going to see this moment as an opportunity for me to grow. And on the other side of this, I'm going to have this and this is going to happen. I'm going to do that. And that's going to give me the capacity to get to the next level. You have to see it better than it is. And then the third thing that you got to do is you've got to go take massive action to make it happen. You've got to work your ass off. You've got to embrace the failure. You've got to lean into it. You've got to understand that the pain and the struggle is part of the process, but it's that pain and struggle, that failure, that is developing your strength. I told you guys what happened in 2020, and I can tell you guys that when I worked through all of that, when the company got back going and we got through the emotional pain, trauma, weight, whatever you want to call it, of that moment, there was a period in July where we had not only overcome that challenge, but our company had taken off and we were growing and things were going better than they had ever gone before. I had this moment of reflection and I just thought, God, I'm fucking unstoppable if I can make it through this. If I can figure this out, there is nothing that I cannot endure, overcome, and create. I had a profound sense of purpose in my life. And more than that, I had a confidence and a strength that I had never had before. And it took losing my father. It took all of that pain and challenge, all of that heartbreak and trauma and COVID and all the fuckery, all that. But on the other side of it, by seeing it as it is, but not seeing it worse than it is, by seeing it better than it can be, and by going out and taking massive fucking action, on the other side of that was a newfound strength that I've never experienced before. And that strength is what I've built this next chapter of my life on. And it's largely why I'm here in front of you guys today sharing these stories. So that's the first framework. If you want to be a leader, you have to see it as it is, not worse than it is. You have to see it better than it is. And then you have to go make it happen. And the final one is what I consider the universal formula of success and overcoming any and all obstacles. And it's very simply, you have to take radical responsibility for that moment. Whatever that failure is, whatever that adversity is, you have to take radical responsibility for it, because that gives you the power to change it. From there, you have to understand that that moment is happening because there is some skill or character trait or belief that you don't have, and you have to commit to constant and never-ending improvement. And by always working on growing and evolving and expanding our capacity, we're going to have the opportunity to continue to keep moving. And then from there, you just have to never fucking quit. And if you can take responsibility for it, commit to constant and never-ending improvement and growing through it, and never fucking quit, you can create the life that you want. You can overcome all of the adversity, endure all of the struggles, and turn your failures into massive success. And that's my prayer for you. That's why I started this podcast, and that's why I'm here today, because I want all of us to fucking win. Life is much better when we're winning and growing and learning together. I believe that the road to success is paved with failure. And we will always learn more in our moments of failure and struggle than we will in our moments of success. It's up to us to lean into them, embrace them, and to grow through them. And if you can do that, then I think you've got this thing figured out. All right, guys, I appreciate you tuning in with me today and hanging out. I believe the greatest gift that we have is the gift of each other. And you've given me some of your time and attention today. And for that, I'm very grateful. I hope this message connected with you. If you found value in it, the only thing that I would ask is to please share it with someone that maybe is going through something, maybe someone that is facing some adversity, and you think this message might be meaningful to them. But I appreciate you guys. Stay tuned for the next episode. We'll talk soon.